Welcome back to the Backwards History Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Will, here with my co-host, Kevin. Say hi, Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Shut up, Kevin.
How about we take a vote on it?
Depends on what era we take a vote in.
That's a very good point.
On whether you would have a vote. I would have a vote pretty much in any era.
Pretty much.
Because I'm a landowner, but...
And I am not.
But we're both male, so we would have
white
vote.
males.
White males, yeah. So we would have a vote longer than any group of people.
True.
But we're not going to get too far into that.
Not too far.
Getting into the weeds there a little bit.
A little bit.
Before we do anything else, I want to tell you to go do all those social media thingy things. Go like, share, subscribe. Tell your brothers, tell your mothers, tell your friends. But again, big thank you for all the people who nominated us for the People's Choice Podcast Awards in Society and Culture. We're still trying to wrap our minds around that one.
It still feels like it's not real.
Yeah, because that was a huge goal. We had pretty much counted ourselves out, but because of you guys, we made it, and that means a lot to us.
And there was a lot of other podcasts in that category. Like, I was still shocked. Like,
okay, not gonna lie, we were really afraid of last year's winners who didn't even make the slate. They were both blondes with some plastic augmentations.
Let's go with that.
Yeah, I think that's the safe way to put it. And we counted ourselves out, and you guys made us feel real good about ourselves with the fact that you made that possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess you probably know where we're going since we got a little bit more detailed in the Shut Up Kevin section.
Oh yeah, the section now.
Yeah.
Got my own section.
It's a air quotes section. It's the
Section.
Shut Up Kevin section. Air quotes.
That's what everybody tunes in for anyway.
Exactly. I want somebody to buy the mask that says "Shut Up, Kevin" on the front. I want somebody to buy that mask and send us a picture of you wearing that mask. That would make our lives.
Oh god, that'd be fantastic. Like just oh my god.
And we'll make a shirt that says "Shut Up, Kevin" on the front. If someone messages us on any of our socials or our email at backwardshistorypodcast@gmail.com, message us and tell us you want it, and I will make that design.
And he will enjoy making the design.
Oh, I would love it. I would love it.
I can assure you of that.
But what we were getting into is this month, this year, I don't want to say celebrating because no one's really talking about it. We found this out on our own.
Man, it's a little sad.
Yeah, kind of. Especially considering the social justice parade. And I use that term loosely.
Very.
Just descriptively, that we're having in the country right now. But this month, this year, is the 100th anniversary of the passage of women's suffrage, or otherwise known as women's right to vote. And with all the talk of the patriarchy and women's rights and believe women, hashtag believe women,
Yeah.
you know, hashtag she's right, whatever, hashtag men always wrong.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Hashtag I'm trying to be as offensive as possible.
He's doing a good job.
Right? We figured it would be bigger news than it has been.
Yeah, I really did think that. I mean,
We're like, what, a week away from the end of August 2020, and this is the first I'm even hearing about it. Not to say it's not, no one said anything at all.
it's just not mainstream.
It's not mainstream, yeah. So we kind of wanted to talk about the history of women's suffrage, and then, of course, I'm going to do the same thing I just did and be hashtag as offensive as possible at the end of the episode like I usually am.
I love it. Hashtag offensive.
But, yeah. Hashtag, we have a resident historian hashtag. I'm going to be annoying with the hashtags.
Whatever will float your boat.
But, as usual, I'm going to hand this over to Kevin.
Thank you, Will. Yeah, this year marks the 100th. I feel like anniversary is an overstatement, but definitely the 100th year that women have in the United States.
Overstatement?
Perhaps.
If there is no statement being made
That's
by
fair.
majority, it's not really an overstatement.
That's a fair point.
So
It is rather disappointing that it's not, being celebrated.
it is kind of disappointing because, I mean, most everyone that we know, and I mean, when I say we know, I'm talking about extended generations, are within the time period of women's suffrage or just past it. Because, like, generally speaking, the oldest people in this country, at least, are going to be in their early 90s, early to mid 90s. I think my grandmother was actually born in 1920. My late grandmother was born in 1920.
Right.
When women's suffrage was passed. So her entire life was with the right to vote.
Right.
Granted, obviously she didn't get that right until she turned 18, but still.
I know I was fortunate enough to know both my great-grandmothers. And they were born in 1912, 1916. So they were actually born before the passage. So the fact that I knew people in my life who were born before women in the United States were, given the right to vote, once you think about it, it's a little staggering. But the history of who can vote and the criteria for which qualifies one to vote in the United States is a bit of a complicated history.
Which I feel like, given the verbiage of the Declaration of Independence, shouldn't really have been a question. Okay, probably gonna get
just a
little bit of feels of some people that are listening. At least for the male population of the country, just because of the specific verbiage used, at least all men should have been able to vote from the start to begin with, and all men should have been treated equally if all men are created equally, air quotes, from the Declaration.
Well, that's where you get into the issue of what
men means.
What was considered?
Was it a pronoun? Was it being used as a noun or a pronoun?
Yeah, it's one of those things of how did they define what a man was?
Right.
And that's a deeper rabbit hole we can get into later.
Yeah, that's like a Civil War rabbit hole, and that's not this episode.
No. But starting off in the very beginning of our country, only white male landowners could vote.
So you couldn't have voted. I could have voted because I own a house. Sorry, Kevin.
I need to apologize. We live in different times.
It wasn't sincere, so it's okay.
I imagine it was. But, on the surface, you're like, well, why only the white dudes with land get to vote? And I had a history teacher explain it to me, and this was the thinking of the people of the time, not a modern day perspective. But it's one of those of, well, they have the most to lose based on who's in office. Guy who's just, renting a one-bedroom apartment, he got a whole lot to lose compared to the dude who owns several hundred acres and a couple of houses and things. Who has the most when it comes to voting? Who has the most incentive?
Which, on top of that, a lot of them were owners of farmland or whatever that was used for sharecropping, so they were the employers of the time.
Right.
So it almost be like only corporations could vote. So if you look at it in a modern perspective, which is kind of against what we try and do, but it'd be kind of like Walmart and Amazon being able to vote and us not, which is kind of not cool.
Yeah,
but
not cool. No, you're right.
Maybe why we changed it.
Perhaps.
You think?
But you fast forward after the Civil War, the right to vote is extended to male U.S. citizens. Well, that doesn't exactly sit well with the female population. As we were talking earlier, it's really disappointing that the 100-year anniversary is not being celebrated more, because it took decades of march and protest and petitions and your picket signs of women going out there and demanding the right to vote.
And by years, Kevin's referring to the fact that the actual women's suffrage movement started pre-Civil War.
Right.
But that's like that's never talked about. No one ever really discusses the fact that it was pre-Civil War. You usually only hear about post-construction women's suffrage.
Right. It usually pops up
post-reconstruction. Excuse me.
It usually pops up around the late 1870s, 1880s. That it really starts to gain any kind of noticeable traction in many history textbooks.
But it actually started in the 1850s.
People, women, were very united in this. It wasn't just white women wanting to vote. There were black women who were, it's just a big a voice, if not larger, pushing for this to have their right.
Now, granted, the pre-Civil War movement was mostly white women. The post-Reconstruction was both.
Right.
At post the passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments.
Now, most people, when it comes to women's suffrage, the only person they name that comes to mind is Susan B. Anthony, who famously was arrested for the crime of voting, which I think a lot of people take for granted these days to be able to go to, cast your ballot. But there were so many other people instrumental in the suffrage movement, and sadly, history always, especially in U.S. history textbooks, just kind of whittles it down to one or two people, a handful of events, a couple of dates here and there. But this was a massive movement that involved a couple of generations of women and a whole lot of work. And for us to be at the 100-year mark, it's just, like I said, it's just very disappointing that it's not making, I guess, bigger waves in today's time.
You would suspect with the highly contentious presidential race that we've currently got going on, that both sides of that race would be kind of pushing that angle,
right?
Trying to win over the women vote, the female vote, and pushing the 100th anniversary of it as a means to drive more women to the polls, as kind of a celebration of that, right?
Right.
So I find it kind of odd that that the media is relatively silent on this.
Exactly. I remember in the last election cycle, I was talking to a female friend of mine, and she was just, it's always contentious election seasons here. And she's like, she just didn't know who to vote for or why. And I explained to her 4 years ago, this right hasn't even been around a century for women. It's something worth exercising.
And that doesn't just apply to women, though. The right to vote is an important right that we all have.
Our civic duty.
I wouldn't say civic duty. It's a duty to ourselves.
That's a fair point.
It's a personal duty. Have your voice heard. Have your opinion heard.
Be counted, kind of.
Yeah, stand up and be counted. And if more people felt that way, and it wasn't like a 30% thing,
right?
And I think 30% is still is actually kind of generous. I think it's like, I actually think it was like 27 last time. I mean, I could be completely way off, but I know that it's relatively a low number.
Yeah, it's usually very depressing, very low.
And if the population as a whole, I mean, I know not everybody's got the best situation where they can necessarily go vote.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not everybody would be able to vote. You're not going to get 100% of anybody to do anything.
No, not even.
Only 100% is breathing, drinking water, and eating, going to the bathroom. That's the basis of life. That's the only thing you're going to get 100% of people to do, and even then, you're still going to have a few that die because they didn't.
Everything else is optional at that point.
Right. And if they did, you may not have the situation of the shiniest turd. The shiniest turd in the pile being the one that wins. Yeah. Because then voting for a third party may be viable.
Well, very viable.
right now, the female vote has the ability to be the tipping point and vote for a third-party candidate, Joe Jorgensen, something like that. Forgive us if we mispronounce her name.
Sorry.
But she's a viable libertarian candidate that if you got the female vote for a female candidate, she would be the first third-party candidate voted in office in, the last 50 years?
I don't even know it's been that long.
Bull Moose was the last third party, wasn't it?
Yeah, but he didn't get voted in.
Right. And he ran as a primary party prior to that.
Yeah, he didn't get the nomination for another run, so he ran as an independent. If I remember correctly, he got about 27% of the vote, which was enough that his party didn't win. That he took enough votes away from them.
Right.
So it's kind of like a spoiler, kind of like, you didn't pick me, so you're not going to win.
But women have more power than they think. Mm-hmm. You hear patriarchy this, patriarchy that. We're the downtrodden, we're the put upon, and we're paid less, we're hired less. That's more nuanced than it's given credit. Mm-hmm. Genetically, physiologically, mentally, women and men are 100% created differently, or born differently, or what have you. They are different, but not in a fashion of one is better than the other. It's a very much a yin and yang type situation.
Nice balance, if you will.
Right. Whereas one is gifted in one aspect, the other is gifted in a complementary aspect.
Right, that's a good word for it.
Women's power is not supposed to come from the same place as men, but it is equal, but not the same. Is that fair?
I heard somebody put it once. Women shouldn't focus on being able to do what men can. They should focus more on doing what men can't.
Exactly. And that makes them just as important and powerful and equal. Mm-hmm. You're equal because you're not the same.
Right. It's, it's definitely a balance.
There have been entire countries and empires that have risen and fallen on the whims of women because, let's face it, men can be weak to the will of a woman.
Oh, yeah. A lot of history examples to support that one.
Cleopatra comes to mind.
Yeah. Helen of Troy.
Mm-hmm.
Joan of Arc.
There's a long list. Some might say Marilyn Monroe, but we're not going to go into the Kennedy situation this time. But as we've kind of already stated, by the fact that this is the 100th anniversary, that means that the vast majority of women in this country have never lived without the right to vote, without the right to have their voice heard. The old saying is, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent.
All right.
So if you feel inferior, that's on you. As someone in the tech industry, I can tell you that most women, because they, I guess, are, for lack of a better term, minorities, are paid more, are given preferential treatment because they are the minority. But the goals equal pay, equal work, and all the other stuff. But then it's, but I'm a woman. I need to be treated differently. Mm-hmm. But you want equality, which is the goal. I don't quite get the goal of the feminist movement. I'm not saying this is all women. I'm talking about like the pink knit hat people that are, at least what we see in interviews and stuff, are kind of crazy in a lot of instances. The ones that wear the hats.
Right.
I won't say given. You earned equal rights. What you didn't, your predecessors did. 100 years ago. Make it worth it. Don't waste it. But that goes for everybody, not just women.
True.
All men, and by men, I mean the overarching, like, humanity men term. These truths we hold self-evident. All men are created equal. Be equal. Use your strengths. While male and female might have different strengths and weaknesses, every individual has their own strengths and weaknesses. Equal opportunity does not mean equal outcome. You have to make that one happen. That's on you. But as always, we're not experts. We don't pretend to be. We don't ever want anyone to take us as experts. We want you to do your own research, form your own opinions, trust, but verify.